A runaway bride entered the wrong castle. She crossed paths with a dashing lord. Welcome to Soul Stories, your home for heart-touching tales of love, hope, and second chances. If you believe in the power of kindness and the magic of unexpected connections, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing family. Now let's begin today's story. The wind howled through the pines, clawing at the windows of the borrowed SUV as Annabelle Kingsley gripped the steering wheel tighter. Snowflakes slammed against the windshield, each one like a tiny punch, blurring the road ahead. She hadn't meant to end up on Route 7, a back road leading to nowhere, far from the gilded prison of the Cape Cod resort where her wedding dress still hung, never worn, in a room she would never return to. Her hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of what she had just done. 2 hours ago, she had slipped out of the bridal suite, past her stepfather's security team, the cameras, and the life she'd been forced into since she was 16. The dress, ivory silk, suffocatingly perfect, was left behind. She traded it for jeans, a fleece-lined jacket, and the keys to the SUV she snagged from the catering staff, with the GPS disabled using a pair of nail clippers and a whispered prayer. She wasn't stupid. She knew they'd come after her. Stepfather Victor Hargrove, with his senator's smile and secret ledgers, or fiancé Ethan Caldwell, whose family owned half the power grid in New England. She had seen the documents hidden in a locked drawer in Victor's office back when she was his assistant. Names, dates, transactions, money funneled through shell companies, campaign funds never declared. And her name scribbled on a contract. Marriage to Ethan, the merger of blood and power. Annabelle hit the gas, and the SUV skidded slightly on the icy road. Canada was the plan. Cross the border, vanish in Montreal, start over. She had saved enough from her assistant's salary, tucked away in a secret account Victor didn't know about. But the storm had other plans. The radio had gone dead an hour ago, after warning of a blizzard swallowing Vermont whole, and her phone had no signal, the screen now a useless glow in the passenger seat. "Just keep driving," she whispered, her breath fogging the air. The wipers groaned, struggling against the falling snow. She squinted through the whiteout, searching for a signpost, a gas station, anything. Then a flicker of light, dim and warm, blinked through the trees on the right. She slowed, her heart pounding. A road sign, half buried in snow, read Ravencourt Lane. Beyond it, a narrow path wound into the woods where that faint light pulsed like a heartbeat. A house? A ranger station? She didn't care. The fuel was low, and the cold was beginning to seep through the vents. She turned, tires crunching over frozen gravel. The trees parted, and there it was, a mansion, or what was left of one. Ravencourt Manor loomed in the storm, its sharp towers like broken teeth, windows dark except for that flickering light. Ivy strangled the stone walls and the wrought iron gate hung open, rusted and forgotten. It looked like a place time had given up on. Annabelle stopped the car, killed the engine, and sat in silence listening to the wind shriek. Her backpack held a granola bar, a water bottle, and a USB drive containing Victor's copied files. Not much, but enough to either keep her alive or get her killed. She zipped her jacket, pulled up her hood, and stepped into the storm. Snow pricked her skin as she trudged to the front door, the warped wood still solid beneath her gloved hand. She pushed. It groaned open, surprisingly easy, and stepped into a shadowy great hall. The air inside was thick with dust and a hint of mildew. A chandelier hung above, its crystals dulled, swaying slightly from the wind, sneaking through shattered panes. "Hello?" her voice echoed. No answer. The flickering light came from deeper inside. Maybe the living room. She moved forward, boots scraping cracked marble, when a sound made her stop. A low, ragged groan, like someone struggling to breathe. Her pulse thudded. She fumbled in her pocket for the dinner knife she'd stolen from the catering tray, a flimsy thing, barely sharp enough to cut butter. "Who's there?" she called out, voice sharp. Another groan, weaker, from the living room. She crept forward, knife raised, and peeked through the doorway. A man lay slumped by the fireplace, the embers barely glowing. Blood soaked his shirt, dark and sticky, seeping from his shoulder. His face was pale, his eyes barely open, glinting with pain or defiance, or both. "Don't move," he rasped, one hand trembling toward a gun on the floor. Too far to reach. Annabelle froze, the knife trembling in her grip. Outside, the storm screamed, trapping them together. She could run, leave him to die, and save herself. But his eyes locked onto hers, and something in them, fear not of her, but of something worse, made her lower the knife. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said, stepping closer, "but you're bleeding, and I'm not going to let you die like this." His lips twitched, maybe a smile, maybe a grimace. "Bad night. To be a hero," he murmured, then collapsed unconscious as the fire turned to ash. Snow clung to Annabelle Kingsley's boots, melting into icy droplets as she knelt beside the stranger in the dark parlor of Ravencourt Manor. The fire in the hearth had long since died, leaving only a few glowing embers that cast faint shadows across his pale face. Blood soaked his shirt at the shoulder, dark and tacky, no longer flowing, a good sign or a very bad one. She wasn't a doctor, just a former congressional aide who had taken a college-level first aid course, but she knew enough to understand that he wouldn't survive the night if she didn't act. The storm outside howled, wind screaming through the cracks in broken windows, bringing with it the biting cold of Vermont. Somewhere in the depths of the mansion, wood groaned as if the house itself was mourning under the weight of its history. Annabelle glanced back at the front door, the one she had entered less than 10 minutes ago. "Run!" a part of her screamed. "Leave him! Go back to the car! Escape this nightmare!" But the SUV was nearly out of fuel, and the road behind her buried in snow. And more than that, the look in the man's eyes before he passed out, a blend of pain and something deeper, almost primal fear, held her in place. She had seen that look before, in the mirror on the night she realized she was nothing more than Victor's puppet. She inhaled deeply, forcing herself to focus. "Okay," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "You've got this." She placed the folding knife on the floor beside the man's gun and checked his pulse. Her fingers touched his neck, ice cold, but there it was, a faint, sluggish heartbeat. He was alive, for now. She stood and scanned the room. Ravencourt Manor, even in decay, retained the dignity of a once glorious age. Tattered velvet curtains hung limp at the windows, and dusty furniture stood scattered like remnants of a rushed escape. A faded portrait hung on the wall, depicting a stern man in 19th century formal wear, his eyes seeming to follow her every move. She shivered, not from cold, but from something deeper. This place wasn't just abandoned, it felt cursed. She needed medical supplies, anything that could help. In the dim light, she spotted an old wooden cabinet in the corner, its door jammed shut. She tugged hard. Dust erupted into the air, revealing shattered glass jars and, miraculously, a metal first aid kit, rusted but still sealed. She pulled it out, popped the latch, and let out a shaky breath. Gauze, antiseptic, and a pack of cotton, expired for over a decade, but still sealed. "Better than nothing," she muttered, carrying it back to the man. She knelt beside him again, tearing open his shirt at the shoulder. The blood had crusted into a dark scab, but as she wiped it gently with a clean cloth from her backpack, the injury came into focus. A bullet graze, slicing skin and muscle but not hitting bone. Not fatal, but dangerous if it became infected. She bit her lip, recalling her first aid training. Clean, dress, keep warm. She soaked a cotton pad in antiseptic, took a deep breath, and dabbed it on the wound. The man groaned softly, eyelids fluttering, but didn't wake. "Sorry," she whispered, even though he couldn't hear. She dressed the wound with gauze, wrapping it snugly, tight enough to protect, but not to cut off circulation. Once done, she checked the rest of his body. No other serious injuries, just some bruises and a shallow cut on his hand. But he was cold, far too cold. The temperature inside the mansion was barely better than outside, and he needed warmth. She pulled a dusty throw blanket from a nearby sofa and draped it over him, then gathered bits of firewood from a stack beside the hearth. She'd started campfires back in college, but her hands shook as she struck the match from the first aid kit. After several failed attempts, the flame finally caught, casting warm light against the stone walls. She sat down, hugging her knees, watching the man. He looked to be in his 30s, dark hair damp with sweat, jaw shadowed with stubble. Even unconscious, he radiated tension, like someone who never fully let down his guard. The gun on the floor, a Glock she guessed from hearing Victor's staff talk about weapons, lay between them like a warning. Who was he? A criminal? A victim? Or both, just like her? She rummaged through her backpack, pulling out a granola bar and a water bottle. She nibbled slowly, trying not to think about the USB stick hidden in her coat pocket, the one that could destroy her stepfather's life, and maybe hers. She had planned to send it to an investigative journalist in Washington, but hadn't gotten the chance. Now, stranded in this forgotten mansion, all she could do was hope the storm passed before anyone found her, or him. A sharp creak startled her, wood groaning, this time closer, from somewhere in the hallway. She grabbed the knife again, heart pounding. Just the house, she told herself, but her grip stayed tight on the handle. She glanced at the man, still unconscious, then rose and stepped to the doorway. The hallway was pitch black, but she spotted a tarnished plaque on the wall, its engraving barely legible. Raven Court Estate, 1872. Below it, in smaller script, nearly worn away, in umbris veritas, in the shadows there is truth. She shivered and turned back to the parlor. The fire still flickered, but the man was stirring, a low groan escaping his lips. His eyes blinked open, glazed at first, then locked on to her. "Who are you?" he rasped, voice rough as gravel. Annabelle tightened her grip on the knife but didn't raise it. "I should be asking you that," she replied more calmly than she felt. "But for now, just stay still. I just saved your life." His lips curled into a faint pain smile. "Saved or killed me? Still time to choose," he murmured, then his eyes drifted shut again, pulling him back into unconsciousness. She sat beside him, back pressed against the icy stone wall. The storm still raged outside, and Ravencourt Manor, with all its secrets, seemed to be waiting to tell a story she wasn't ready to hear. The fire in Ravencourt Manor's hearth danced, casting long shadows across the cold stone walls. Annabelle Kingsley sat curled up near the flames, clutching her folding knife tightly, eyes locked on the man she had just saved. He lay there beneath the worn blanket she had covered him with, his breathing shallow and uneven. The wound on his shoulder was roughly bandaged, but his pale face and bluish lips told her he wasn't out of danger. The blizzard outside continued to rage, trapping them in this stone tomb, and each creak of the old house made her heart race faster. She didn't know who he was, but the Glock on the floor just beyond his reach and the fierce gleam in his eyes before he passed out told her he wasn't just some lost traveler. Part of her wanted to get up, grab her backpack, and take her chances with the storm. Anywhere seemed safer than sitting next to a man who might be more dangerous than the people she was running from. But she had seen something in him, a familiar pain, like he too was fleeing from some invisible monster. Just like her. A faint groan snapped her out of her thoughts. The man stirred, his eyes fluttering open, catching the glow of the fire. He tried to sit up, but immediately winced, one hand clutching his bandaged shoulder. "Don't move," Annabelle said quickly, her tone sharper than intended. "You'll make it worse." He turned his head slowly, his eyes scanning her like a wolf assessing prey. What are you doing here?" His voice was hoarse, every word pulled painfully from a dry throat. He glanced down at the gun on the floor, then back at her, noting that she hadn't picked it up. "I should be asking you that," she replied, still gripping the knife, low and non-threatening, but ready. "I was looking for shelter from the storm and found you, bloody and barely alive. Who shot you?" He gave a bitter, pained smile. "Good question. Doesn't matter. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." He tried to shift again, but groaned and dropped his head back against the blanket. Annabelle stood and approached, keeping enough distance to react if needed. "Safe or not, I didn't have a choice. My car's out of gas, my phone's dead, and there's a blizzard outside. What about you? Why are you here, in an abandoned mansion, with a bullet wound?" He was silent for a moment, breathing heavily. Then he looked up, eyes sharper, as if he'd made a decision. Damien, Damien Blackwell, he said, his voice low but clear. That's my name, at least the one I go by now. She frowned, her pulse quickening. Now? What does that mean? He took a deep breath, as if telling the truth required great effort. I used to work for the NSA Intelligence Analysis. My team was investigating a cross-border money laundering network, oil money, gas money, flowing into the pockets of politicians and energy giants. We found proof, offshore accounts, shell deals, even bribery during elections. But, he paused, his eyes darkening. Someone betrayed us. They framed me for leaking classified information, labeled me a traitor. I got away with the data, but they weren't about to let me live with it. Annabelle felt the blood drain from her face. His words, money laundering, energy corporations, politicians, rang in her ears like alarm bells. She remembered the files in her stepfather Victor Hargrove's office, lists of transactions, shell companies, and large sums funneled into campaign funds. She had copied them onto the USB in her backpack, but she had never imagined they were tied to anything beyond her family. Now, sitting across from a hunted man, she felt the world shrinking, as if fate had pulled them both into the same trap. You okay? Damien asked, his voice raspier but sharp, like he could see the panic rising in her. She shook her head, trying to steady herself. I used to work for a senator, she said, her voice trembling. My stepfather. I found documents, things like what you're describing, money laundering, illegal donations. They forced me to marry someone to keep me quiet. I ran, and now I'm here. Damien stared at her for so long she felt like he was reading her mind. What's your name? He asked, his voice softer, but still guarded. Annabelle. Annabelle Kingsley. He nodded slightly as if the name held some meaning. Annabelle, he repeated, confirming it to himself. If you're telling the truth, then we have the same enemy, and they won't stop until we're dead, or worse. She swallowed hard, the chill in her chest no longer just from the air. Who are they? Who's hunting you? Damien closed his eyes like the question drained him. I don't know all of them. It's a coalition. Politicians, CEOs, and people who operate in the shadows. They know I have the data, and they think I've already sent it. But I haven't. Not yet. It's still here. He tapped his coat pocket where something small, probably a hard drive, made a soft click. She stared at him, heart racing. And if they find you, or me, they already found me, he said, eyes flashing open. This bullet wasn't a mistake. I left a signal, a satellite phone call, just one, before I came here. I thought I encrypted it, but he shook his head. They were better than I thought. Annabelle's stomach clenched. If they had already tracked Damien down, then this mansion wasn't a refuge. It was a trap. She glanced toward the window, where snow still fell thick and heavy, hiding everything. Can they get here, through this storm? Maybe, Damien said, voice low. But the storm's also keeping us alive. They can't move faster than we can. At least not tonight. She sank down again, back against the wall, her mind spinning. Just hours ago, she thought she was fleeing a forced marriage and a tyrannical stepfather. Now she was trapped with a man named Damien Blackwell, an alleged ex-NSA analyst, and secrets that could collapse entire institutions. She didn't know if she could trust him or if she should fear him. But one thing was certain. His story, whether true or not, was the missing piece in her own nightmare. You should rest, Damien said, his voice weak but firm. If they come, we'll need strength to run. She nodded, though she wasn't sure she could sleep. She pulled her backpack close, fingers brushing the USB in her coat pocket. In the flickering firelight, she looked at Damien, the man with many names, and wondered if he was her salvation, or the one who would drag her deeper into the dark. Ravencourt Manor was cloaked in darkness, the flickering fireplace now little more than the dying breath of a fading creature. Annabelle Kingsley sat huddled against the stone wall, her backpack clutched tightly to her chest, fingers still wrapped around the folding knife, though she knew it would be useless if the truth came knocking. Across from her, Damien Blackwell lay beneath a threadbare blanket, his breathing steadier but still weak. The wound on his shoulder, though bandaged, caused him to wince every time he shifted. The blizzard still howled outside, but now the wind seemed to carry a warning she couldn't ignore. She had tried not to dwell on what Damien had told her, about the NSA, the stolen data, and the relentless hunters after him. But his words drilled into her mind like steel, resurrecting memories of the documents she'd found in her stepfather Victor Hargrove's office. Transaction lists, shell company names, and the marriage contract designed to silence her. She glanced at Damien, the man with many names, and wondered if he was an ally or just another trap fate had set. A sudden flash of light cut through the darkness, slicing across the parlor window. Annabelle flinched, heart hammering. It wasn't moonlight or an illusion. It was a headlight, faint and flickering through the heavy snow. She sprang to her feet and ran to the window, but Damien's voice cracked through the darkness, hoarse and sharp as a blade. "Get away from the window! Kill the fire! Now!" She turned and saw him upright, clutching his shoulder, eyes blazing in the dark. "What? Who is it?" she whispered, her voice shaking but trying to stay calm. "Not the police," he said grimly. "Cops don't sneak around in snowstorms. Douse the fire, and don't turn on any lights." He tried to stand but collapsed with a groan, teeth clenched in pain. Annabelle didn't ask questions. She rushed to the hearth, grabbed a log from the pile, and stirred the coals until the fire hissed and died. Smoke billowed, stinging her eyes, but the room plunged into instant darkness. She dropped to her knees beside Damien, heart pounding so loudly she feared it would echo in the silence. "Who are they?" she whispered. "Contractors," Damien murmured, his voice so low she had to lean in to hear. "Mercenaries, probably from a private security firm. They traced me from the satellite ping I sent 2 days ago. I thought I cut the link, but—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I was wrong." Annabelle swallowed hard, the chill in her bones no longer just from the cold air. She glanced toward the window again, where the headlight reappeared, drifting slowly through the snow like a predator sniffing for prey. Then a faint sound, gravel crunching beneath tires, cut through the wind. They were close. Too close. "We have to hide," Damien said, trying to push himself up. He staggered, but his eyes stayed sharp, his will stronger than his body. "Basement. There's an entrance off the hallway. Hurry." Annabelle nodded, already moving. She threw her backpack over her shoulder, grabbed Damien's gun from the floor. It was cold and heavy in her hand, unfamiliar but necessary, and helped him to his feet. He leaned into her as they stumbled out of the parlor. The hallway was pitch black, lit only by the faint glow from shattered windows. She found a wooden door, nearly invisible in the paneling, with a rusted handle. She yanked it open, and it creaked loudly, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Go!" Damien urged, his breath ragged. She helped him down the stairs, each creaking step protesting their weight. The air turned damp and earthy, the scent of mildew rising around them. At the bottom, darkness swallowed everything. She groped along the wall until she found a corner full of rotting crates and cobwebs, and eased Damien down to sit, his back against the wall. "Quiet," he said, his voice low but firm. "They'll search the house. If we're lucky, the storm will cover our tracks." She nodded, though he couldn't see her, and sat down beside him, clutching her backpack. The gun remained in her hand, her finger trembling against the trigger guard. She had never fired a gun before, and the thought of using it twisted her stomach. She strained her ears, listening for anything above. The wind still moaned, but another sound soon crept in. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, on the wooden floor above them. A muffled voice followed, deep and distorted by the storm. She couldn't make out the words, but the intent was clear. They were inside. Damien's hand brushed against hers, startling her with its warmth. "Breathe," he whispered, barely audible. "They don't know you're here. If they find me, run. Don't look back." She shook her head, though he couldn't see. "I'm not leaving you," she whispered, her voice steadier than she felt. She didn't know why she said it. Maybe because he was the only one who understood what she was running from. Maybe because she was tired of running alone. He didn't respond, but she felt his gaze in the dark, heavy and unreadable. They sat there, shoulder to shoulder, their breath mingling in the freezing air. The footsteps paused overhead, then resumed, fading slowly. A door creaked open. Then, silence. She waited, every second stretched like an hour, until Damien finally spoke. "They're gone. For now." She exhaled, only then realizing she'd been holding her breath. "They'll come back, won't they?" she asked, voice trembling. "Probably," he said quietly. "They don't give up. Not when the data I have could bring down an empire." She turned toward him, even though his face was hidden by the dark. "And what about me? I don't have your data, but I have—" She hesitated, fingers brushing the backpack where Victor Hargrove's secrets slept on a USB drive. "If they know I'm here, would they kill me too?" Damien was quiet for a moment, then said softly but with conviction, "I don't know, Annabelle, but I won't let them touch you. Not while I'm still breathing." His words, though simple, hit her like a weight to the chest. She didn't know if she could trust him, a hunted man with a shadowy past and a gun for company. But in that moment, in the frigid darkness of Ravencourt Manor's basement, she felt a truth she couldn't deny. Damien's life, and maybe her own, were both hanging by a thread. And for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. She clutched her backpack tighter, eyes fixed on the dark stairwell above. The blizzard still roared, but the visitors in the snow had left a clear warning. Time was running out. Dawn leaked through the broken windows of Ravencourt Manor, gray light mingling with dust and smoke, illuminating the cracks in the stone walls. Annabelle Kingsley sat curled up in the frigid basement, her backpack pressed to her chest, ears still tuned to the slightest sound from above. The visitors in the snow had left hours ago, but the silence they left behind was more unnerving than their footsteps. She glanced at Damien Blackwell, who leaned against an old wooden crate, his face pale but his eyes razor-sharp. Like he hadn't let down his guard even for a moment, despite his exhausted body. The wound on his shoulder, though bandaged, still made him grimace whenever he moved. But Damien didn't seem to notice the pain. He was rummaging through a pile of junk in the basement corner, a rusted suitcase, a few decayed notebooks, and a brass plaque etched with Ravencourt, 1923. "This place wasn't just a house," he said, voice hoarse but steady. "During Prohibition, it was a hub. Bootleg liquor, money, and sometimes documents. Powerful families in New England used it to hide their secrets." Annabelle furrowed her brows, trying to follow his train of thought. "You mean, this place used to hide things like your data?" Damien nodded, eyes fixed on one oddly smooth section of wall. No moss, no cracks. "Not like my data. Exactly like it." He stood, staggering slightly, and waved her off when she moved to help. His fingers moved along the wall, probing until a dry click echoed through the room. A section of stone slid aside, revealing an old safe, rusted but solid, its combination dial worn nearly smooth by time. Her eyes widened, heart pounding. "How did you know it was there?" "I studied places like this," Damien replied, kneeling in front of the safe. His voice dropped. "Back at the NSA, I analyzed hidden networks, how they move money and information. Ravencourt came up in some old files, a hotbed during the 1920s. I didn't think it was still functional until I had to run, and ended up here." He turned the dial, ear pressed to the cold metal, listening for each faint click. Annabelle stood behind him, gripping her backpack tightly, the whole scene unfolding like a suspense thriller. Except this was real, and the price might be their lives. After tense minutes, the safe clicked, and the door creaked open to reveal a small compartment holding a portable hard drive, its rubber casing still intact, and several plastic-wrapped folders, yellowed with age but still legible. Damien lifted the drive, a flicker of light in his tired eyes. "This is what they're afraid of," he murmured. "Not just my data. These connect the dots." She stepped forward, eyes on the drive in his hand. "What do you mean? What's in it?" He plugged it into a small device resembling a satellite phone, pulling it from his jacket. The screen lit up, displaying a cascade of encrypted files. "Money laundering records, illegal election funding, and—" He stopped, finger hovering above the screen. "Orders to eliminate witnesses, journalists, government workers, even insiders, wiped out and staged as accidents." Annabelle felt the blood drain from her face. She remembered the late nights in Victor Hargrove's office, hearing him speak coldly about taking care of problems. She had dismissed it as political bluster until she'd found those illicit financial records and her name on a marriage contract with Ethan Caldwell. She swallowed hard, her voice shaky. "Let me see." Damien glanced at her, as if to shield her from what was coming, but then nodded. He opened a file, scrolling through a list of names, dates, and figures. She stood behind him, scanning the screen, until one name stopped her heart. Victor Hargrove. Next to it, transactions. Millions funneled through shell corporations, campaign donations, and a brief note. Ensure silence. Kingsley Caldwell wedding, 2025. She staggered back, hand to her mouth, breath catching. That's my stepfather," she whispered, voice breaking. "They forced me to marry Ethan to keep me quiet, to keep control over me." She remembered Victor's icy stare as he introduced her to Ethan, as if she were just a bargaining chip in a deal. "They knew I saw the files. They knew." Damien shut the device, placing it gently on the ground, his gaze heavy. "Annabelle," he said, voice low but sincere, "you're not just a witness. You're a threat. If they know you have any copies of anything tied to Hargrove, they won't stop." She shook her head, blinking back tears. "I didn't want to be part of this," she said, voice trembling. "I just wanted to run away, start over. But now, I can't, can I?" Damien studied her for a long moment, as if seeing past the layers of fear and uncertainty. "No one chooses this path," he said. "I didn't either. But sometimes the truth chooses you. And then you have to decide, run or fight." She looked down, hand brushing the backpack where her USB drive lay quietly. She had thought she was just escaping a loveless marriage, but now she realized she held a piece of something far bigger, something Damien also carried. They were two sides of the same coin, tossed into a storm not just of snow, but of secrets that could topple empires. She lifted her chin, eyes more resolute, even if her voice still wavered. "If we survive the night, what are you going to do with that data?" Damien gave a faint, tired smile, but it was full of fire. "Send it where it belongs, to people who can expose it, journalists, lawyers, anyone not already bought." He paused, looking at her. "And you? What will you do with yours?" She didn't answer right away, but inside something flickered. No longer fear, but defiance. She thought of Victor, calling her a useful pawn, of Ethan, who never loved her, only wanted to own her, and of herself, who had run, but had never truly been free. "I don't know yet," she said quietly but firmly, "but I won't let them win." Damien nodded, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes, like he recognized the same fire burning inside her. "Then we have the same goal," he said, "survive and take them down." She sat beside him, leaning against the wooden crate, the pale light of dawn creeping through the cracks in the basement. The storm still howled outside, but in this moment, amid danger and hidden truths, Annabelle felt something strange and steady. Clarity. They weren't just two fugitives anymore. They were two sides of the same coin, bound by truth and hunted by shadows. The darkness inside Ravencourt Manor felt heavier as night fell, the only light coming from the flickering fireplace, casting faint glimmers onto the cracked stone walls. Annabelle Kingsley sat by the dwindling fire, clutching her backpack tightly, eyes fixed on Damien Blackwell. He lay on the tattered rug, sweat beading on his forehead, his face flushed despite the freezing air. The wound in his shoulder, though bandaged, was red and swollen, and his breathing had turned labored, each breath a struggle. The blizzard outside still raged, but now the greatest threat wasn't the hunters. It was the time running out inside Damien's body. She gently touched his forehead, her hand trembling. "Too hot." "You have a fever," she whispered, voice shaky but trying to stay calm. She rummaged through the first aid kit they'd found in the basement, but there was nothing left. Just a few dry gauze pads and a nearly empty bottle of antiseptic. She had done all she could with her college-level first aid, but infection was beyond her reach in an abandoned mansion. Damien's eyes opened, clouded but still sharp. "I'm fine," he rasped, voice gravelly. But the grimace that crossed his face as he tried to move said otherwise. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, dust-covered device, a satellite phone, its rubber cables smeared with grime. You need to use this. Annabelle frowned, her heart skipping. A satellite phone? But you said the signal from that is what led them here. She remembered the headlights in the snow, the footsteps above the basement, the feeling of being hunted. It did, Damien said, weak but unwavering. But it's our only chance to get the data out. Contact Lena Cruz, Center for Investigative Journalism. She used to work with me. He coughed, each one tearing at his chest. She'll know what to do. Before doing anything, Annabelle dug through her backpack and pulled out their last granola bar and half-full water bottle. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since fleeing the Cape Cod resort, but Damien needed it more. She broke the bar in half and handed a piece to him. Eat, she said firmly. You need strength, even a little. Damien eyed the granola, managing a faint, crooked smile. Gourmet survival cuisine, he rasped. You're spoiling me, chef. He took it and chewed slowly, each bite an effort. Annabelle sipped the water and passed it to him. He drank in small sips, water dribbling past cracked lips. As she watched him, she realized they were surviving on scraps. Granola, water, and sheer will. She picked up the satellite device, heavy in her hands. The thought of turning it on, of sending a signal that might bring hunters back, made her stomach twist. But then she looked at Damien. Despite the fever consuming him, his gaze held fierce conviction. She couldn't let him die. Not after everything. She drew a deep breath, turned the device on, and the screen blinked to life with a soft beep. She typed the code he gave her, fingers trembling, and waited. After a tense few seconds, a voice crackled through the speaker, female, sharp, and cautious. Who is this? Lena Cruz? Annabelle asked quietly, as if someone outside might hear. I'm a friend of Damien Blackwell. He's hurt. We have the data, money laundering, elections, and murder. There was a pause, then Lena responded, voice low. Damien? He's alive? Where are you? Vermont, an abandoned mansion, Annabelle said, glancing at Damien, who was now breathing heavily again. But someone's hunting us. We need help. And this data, it has to be seen. Do you have proof? Lena asked, voice razor sharp. If so, I can send someone, but I need to know I can trust you. Annabelle swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the hard drive Damien had retrieved from the hidden safe. We have everything. Transactions, names, even kill orders. But Damien's fever is getting worse. He won't make it without a doctor. Silence again, then Lena's voice came firm. Keep him alive. I'll find a way to get to you, but the snowstorm's blocking all roads into Vermont. Send me a sample through this encrypted channel. If it's real, I'll make sure it gets to the right hands. Following Lena's instructions, Annabelle plugged the hard drive into the device and transmitted a single file, a list of financial transactions tied to Victor Hargrove. When the screen confirmed file sent, she powered the device down, heart pounding. She had just done something irreversible. The world could now learn the truth, or she and Damien could die before that happened. She returned to Damien, wiping sweat from his forehead with a clean cloth from her bag. I called Lena, she said softly. She's going to help. You just have to hold on. He gave a faint nod, eyes half closed. You're braver than you think, he whispered, a ghost of a smile on his lips. She shook her head, eyes stinging. I'm scared, Damien. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be the one fighting. His gaze met hers, glowing with quiet strength, even in sickness. No one wants to, he said, voice deep and rough. I didn't. When I joined the NSA, I thought I'd protect this country. But then I saw the truth. The people I trusted betrayed me. The people I loved, his voice broke. They vanished, and I couldn't save them. She sat beside him, back to the wall, close enough to feel his warmth. I believed too, she said quietly, as if confessing to herself. My stepfather, Victor, he raised me, but I was just a tool to him. I thought if I worked hard, if I obeyed, I'd earn my own life. Then I found his files and realized the world only wanted me silent. Damien turned his head toward her, his gaze deep and full of pain. The world's good at that, erasing the ones who speak the truth. But you're not alone, Annabelle. Not tonight. His words cut and soothed all at once. She didn't reply. She just pulled the blanket tighter around him. They sat there, shoulder to shoulder, in the faint warmth of the fire. The flames flickered lower, smoke curling into the air, and in that moment, they didn't need confessions or romantic touches. Their presence, two scarred souls in the shadows of Ravencourt Manor, was enough to dull the sting of abandonment. She stared at the fire, thinking of Lena Cruz, the data, Victor. If we survive this, she whispered, I want them to pay, not just for me, but for everyone they've hurt. Damien nodded slowly, eyes closed now, but his voice was steady. We will, together. She leaned her head back against the wall, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. The storm still howled beyond the stone walls, but in this room, wrapped in smoke and confessions, Annabelle felt the faintest spark of hope. Fragile, but just enough to keep her fighting. Ravencourt Manor lay cloaked in darkness, pierced only by the wind shrieking through shattered windows and the faint crackle of the dying fire, like the last breath of something once living. Annabelle Kingsley sat beside Damien Blackwell, her fingers gripping her backpack, eyes fixed on his pale face. The fever had taken hold, sending shivers through him beneath the threadbare blanket. His shoulder wound was angry and red, and each breath was jagged, a brutal reminder that time was slipping through their fingers. The blizzard outside still raged, but after the call to Lena Cruz, a flicker of hope had sparked inside her, until headlights once again cut through the snow, brighter now, more aggressive. Annabelle froze, heart pounding. The light swept across the parlor window, accompanied by the low, guttural growl of an engine. Not a normal car. It sounded armored. They're back, she whispered, her voice trembling. She lunged for the window, but Damien, weak as he was, caught her wrist and pulled her to the floor. Don't let them see you, he rasped, eyes burning with urgency, even as his body betrayed him. They're not here to arrest. They're here to erase us. He coughed violently, then pointed toward the hallway. The basement. There's a tunnel. Prohibition era. We have to go. There was no time for questions. A sharp scent of gasoline drifted through the doorframe, followed by the crash of shattering glass in the roar of fire. Black smoke surged into the parlor, burning her eyes. Panic surged through her, but she grabbed Damien, hoisting him to his feet. He was heavier than she expected, each step a painful ordeal. She snatched up the backpack and the hard drive from the safe, stuffing them into her coat, and pulled him toward the hall. Flames roared behind them, devouring velvet curtains and dry wood. A dark figure passed the window, a man in black with a rifle at the ready. Annabelle shoved Damien into the corner, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might give them away. They're burning the house, she whispered. They want to destroy the data. Damien nodded, face ashen. The safe, they know about it. The satellite ping confirmed it. He motioned toward the basement door, where they had once hidden. Go! She flung it open and helped him down the narrow stairs, smoke chasing them like a beast. The basement was damp and cold, but safe. For now. She fumbled in the dark, searching for the tunnel Damien had mentioned. A warped wooden panel, nearly indistinguishable from the wall, creaked loudly as she pushed. Behind it, a low, narrow tunnel opened up, its air stale with the faint scent of old booze and mold. This is it, she said, voice trembling but resolute. They staggered inside, but the crack of gunfire rang out above them, followed by heavy boots slamming across the floor. They know, Damien rasped. He shoved her forward, but then a bullet splintered the wooden panel and grazed his leg. He collapsed, blood staining the dirt floor, but still roared, Run! Annabelle didn't think. She pulled him up, ignoring the blood, the smoke, the terror. I'm not leaving you, she shouted, voice cracking in the chaos. She lifted him onto her back, his body heavy and limp, and pressed forward. The tunnel was long and suffocating, but she felt cold air ahead, a way out. The flames and the men chasing them faded behind her, but she didn't stop. After what felt like forever, the tunnel opened onto a snow-covered hillside, several hundred feet from the manor. Ravencourt burned on the hilltop, a blazing pyre lighting up the storm. Annabelle collapsed to her knees beneath a pine tree, setting Damien down carefully. Blood from his legs stained the snow. She tore a strip from her shirt and wrapped it tightly around the wound, her hands shaking too badly to tie a proper knot. "Just stay still," she said, voice cracking. "We made it out." Damien reached for her hand, his grip weak but his gaze unwavering. You're stronger than I thought," he whispered, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She didn't reply. Instead, she checked the backpack. The hard drive was still there. She rummaged for the old water bottle. Just a few sips left. She handed it to Damien, but he shook his head. "You drink it. You need it more." She hesitated, then took a small sip. The water was lukewarm and bland, but it helped her focus. Her stomach ached from hunger. The last granola bar had been the night before, but survival came first. She dragged Damien toward an old ranger station nearby, a small wooden cabin with a broken window and a sagging roof. Inside, she laid him gently on the floor and pulled the blanket from her bag to cover him. Then she knelt beside him, listening, every muscle tight. The fire still crackled in the distance. But then came another sound. An engine, softer, closer. A black truck rolled to a stop in the snow. The headlights went dark immediately. Annabelle grabbed her folding knife, prepared to fight, but then a woman's voice called out, sharp but not threatening. "Annabelle? Damien! It's Lena Cruz!" She exhaled, tears blurring her vision. She threw open the cabin door to find a woman in her 30s with her dark hair tied up, bundled in a heavy coat, standing beside two men with backpacks and camera equipment. "You're Lena?" Annabelle asked, voice shaking. "Yes," Lena replied, stepping into the cabin, eyes immediately locking on Damien. "God, he's bad. We need to move. Local police are on their way, but I don't trust them. Someone bought them off." Lena and one of the men hoisted Damien into the truck while Annabelle climbed in beside him, still clutching the backpack, the hard drive heavy like a live grenade in her lap. Damien, barely conscious, managed a whisper. "You did it." The truck rolled away through the snow, leaving behind the flames on the hill and the shadows that hunted them. From the front seat, Lena turned back, her voice unwavering. "The data you sent is confirmed. We're going to publish it, but you both need to stay alive, to testify." Annabelle nodded, eyes on Damien, whose breathing was ragged but steady. She thought of Victor Hargrove, of Ravencourt Manor, and of herself, not the runaway bride, but the woman who became a fighter. The fire might have consumed the house, but it would never burn the truth they carried. Are you still following the story? Please leave your thoughts on the story in the comments below. All your comments are the motivation for us to create better stories. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul Stories. Thank you very much. Cold white light from the laptop screen cast stark shadows on Annabelle Kingsley's face, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. She sat in a cheap motel room on the outskirts of Burlington, Vermont, the blinds drawn tightly, the door locked. Beside her, Damien Blackwell leaned back against the headboard, fresh bandages wrapped around his shoulder and leg. His face was still pale, but his eyes were brighter now. A bottle of antibiotics and a half-empty water bottle sat on the table, remnants of the rushed medical visit Lena Cruz had arranged after pulling them from the burning wreckage of Ravencourt Manor. The snowstorm outside had finally calmed, but another storm, far bigger, far more dangerous, was raging on the screen before them. Lena Cruz, her hair tied back in a sharp ponytail and her voice as precise as a blade, stood center frame in a live-stream press conference, broadcast across the biggest media platforms in the country. She stood against a plain backdrop, the logo of the Center for Investigative Journalism behind her, one hand gripping a microphone, the other pointing at a large screen displaying documents, audio clips, and screenshots from the hard drive Annabelle and Damien had risked their lives to protect. "We have irrefutable evidence," Lena said, her voice echoing through the laptop speaker. "Cross-border money laundering, illegal campaign financing, and murder disguised as accidents. The names in these files, senators, CEOs, and high-level operatives, manipulated the system for personal gain." Annabelle clutched her backpack, her fingers brushing against the USB containing a duplicate of Victor Hargrove's files. She wasn't present at the press conference. Lena had insisted she and Damien stay hidden to avoid retaliation. But when the screen displayed Victor Hargrove's name beside a list of multi-million-dollar transactions, her heart clenched. Her stepfather, the man who had raised her and used her like a pawn, was now exposed to the entire nation. What she felt wasn't triumph, but the cold ache of betrayal finally confirmed. Damien gently touched her hand, his gaze steady and soft. "You did it," he rasped, his voice still rough from fever. "They can't hide anymore." She nodded but said nothing. Her eyes remained locked on the screen as Lena played an audio clip. Victor's voice, cold and calculating, discussing how to deal with an investigative journalist from last year. The live stream's comment section flooded, shock, outrage, and an explosion of hashtags. Ravencourt files began trending nationwide. Public outrage flared like the fire that had consumed the manor, and Annabelle knew it was the only reason the FBI couldn't sweep it under the rug. Lena's voice continued unwavering. "We have forwarded the complete data set to the FBI and the Federal Election Commission. We demand a transparent investigation, untainted by those named in these files." She paused, locking eyes with the camera. This is not just one person's story. This is the story of those who were silenced, threatened, or erased for daring to speak the truth. The screen shifted to a photo of Ravencourt Manor before the fire, a Gothic structure standing solemn in the snowy woods. Annabelle closed her eyes, flashes of memory rushing back. The black smoke, the sound of gunfire, the freezing air as she carried Damien through the tunnel. When she opened her eyes again, Damien's hand squeezed hers tighter, as if he could feel the memory stirring in her. "The FBI has acted," Lena's voice cut through. "In the past 48 hours, senators, CEOs, and other individuals, including Victor Hargrove, have been detained for questioning. But we will not stop here. The full truth must come to light." Annabelle exhaled, not realizing she had been holding her breath. She turned to Damien, who watched the screen with a complex mix of exhaustion and relief. "They arrested him," she whispered. "Victor, he's not getting away with this." "Not yet," Damien said, voice low. "People like Hargrove have money and power. They'll fight back. But now the world is watching. They can't silence everyone." She nodded, feeling a heavy weight lift, if only slightly. She thought of the days they spent on the run, the last granola bar they split, the water Damien refused so she could stay strong. They had survived on the barest essentials: food, hope, and willpower. And now, in this dim motel room, with the scent of stale coffee in a paper cup and the low hum of the TV in the background, she felt a new kind of clarity. They hadn't just survived, they had changed the game. "Lena's better than I remembered," Damien said, managing a faint smile. "She always knew how to stir a crowd." Annabelle smiled for the first time in days, the expression fragile but real. "She's the reason we're still alive," she said softly. "And you're the reason I didn't give up." He looked at her, eyes deep with something unsaid, then settled for, "We're a team, Annabelle. From the fire to this room. Don't forget that." She nodded, still holding his hand. On the screen, Lena concluded her broadcast, but the comment section kept exploding, with millions demanding justice. Annabelle knew their journey wasn't over. The FBI might investigate, but men like Victor weren't easily toppled. And yet, for the first time, she didn't feel like a pawn anymore. She felt like a player, a commander. She looked at Damien, the man who had given her the courage to fight, and knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. She stood, picked up the cup of cold coffee, and handed it to Damien. "Drink," she said gently. "We need to stay sharp. The fight's just beginning." He took it with a spark of mischief in his eyes, even through the fatigue. "As you command, Captain," he said, taking a sip as they both turned back to the screen, where the court of public opinion was now passing judgment on those who once believed themselves untouchable. Spring arrived in Vermont like a whisper, soft sunlight brushing the hills, the scent of new grass drifting in the breeze. Annabelle Kingsley stood in the small kitchen of a rented house in Burlington, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, her eyes following Damien Blackwell through the window. He sat on a wooden chair on the porch, a slim medical patch now replacing the bulky bandages on his shoulder. Though he still sat slightly hunched, as if his body remembered every flame, every frozen breath, every mile of the escape. The bullet wound in his leg had healed, but the scars, both visible and not, lingered. 3 weeks had passed since Lena Cruz's live-stream press conference. The FBI had launched an official investigation, detaining Victor Hargrove and several other powerful figures. But Annabelle and Damien remained in the shadows, moving from safe house to avoid retaliation. Lena had arranged doctors and shelter, but it was Annabelle who had stayed by Damien's side, through the fevers, the restless nights, and the quiet hours where neither of them could run from their past. She set the coffee down, grabbed 2 slices of bread, and spread peanut butter and strawberry jam across them. A simple breakfast, yet enough to remind her of the granola bars they once split in the ruins of Ravencourt. She carried the plate outside, set it in front of Damien, and took the seat across from him. "Eat," she said gently. "You need your strength back." Damien offered a tired but sincere smile. "Still giving orders, Captain?" he teased, picking up a slice and taking a bite. He chewed slowly, then looked up. "Thank you, Annabelle. Not just for this." She smiled faintly, but her eyes held the weight of weeks spent recounting every detail to the FBI. Over encrypted video calls, through hours of testimony. She had told them everything. Victor's documents, the marriage contract, the days in hiding. Every word was a blade, but she had no regrets. "I just want it to be over," she murmured. "But I know it's not. Victor, he's got the best lawyers, and men like him don't fall easily." Damien nodded, gaze distant. "No, but they bleed. Ravencourt Files is still trending. The public hasn't forgotten." He turned to her. "You changed everything, Annabelle. Don't forget that." She shook her head, tears pricking her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "We changed everything. Together." She reached for his hand, just a small gesture, but full of meaning. The days they'd spent together, wiping sweat from his brow, sharing truths too painful to speak aloud, simply existing in silence, had bonded them. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something stronger than fear. Damien squeezed her hand gently, but his eyes darkened. "I got a call yesterday," he said quietly, "from an old friend at Langley. They want me back as a security advisor for a new task force under the Department of Justice. They say I could help fix the system." Annabelle's chest tightened. "And what did you say?" "I said no," he replied firmly. "That system, it betrayed me. The people I trusted disappeared, and I couldn't save them. I don't want to be part of that world anymore. I just want—" He paused, staring out at the green hills. "Peace, if there's still such a thing." She nodded, a wave of sadness mixed with relief washing over her. She understood him, perhaps more than anyone. She too had believed in the system, in Victor, in the promises of a better life. But that system had reduced her to a pawn. She wasn't going back either. "So do I," she said, voice trembling slightly. "Which is why I've decided I'm leaving the city. I want to go back to Vermont and buy back the Ravencourt estate." Damien turned to her, surprise flashing across his face, but not resistance. "Ravencourt? After everything that happened?" "Exactly because of it," she said, voice stronger now. "I want to turn it into a sanctuary, a safe house for people like us. People who've been silenced for telling the truth. Lena helped connect me with a nonprofit that supports whistleblowers. They've started a community fundraiser, and I've already raised enough to buy the land. I want to rebuild it, not as it was, but as something better, a place of light, of hope." He looked at her, admiration softening his features. "You really are a fighter," he said, voice low. "I don't know if I'd have the strength to do it, but if anyone can, it's you." She smiled, a real, unburdened smile, maybe the first since all of this began. "I'm not doing it alone," she said, tightening her grip on his hand. "I need a team, and I hope you'll consider staying." Damien didn't answer right away, but his eyes spoke volumes. A quiet promise that no matter what the future held, they wouldn't face it alone. They sat there, hands entwined, watching sunlight filter through the trees. And for the first time, the shadows of Ravencourt seemed to retreat, making way for something new. A beginning. Winter in 2026 laid a soft layer of snow over Vermont, gentle as breath, nothing like the howling blizzard that once trapped Annabelle Kingsley and Damien Blackwell in the darkness of Ravencourt Manor. Now Ravencourt was no longer a cursed stone tomb. The once crumbling estate had been restored, its stone walls reinforced, new windows gleaming with sunlight, and a wooden sign hung proudly on the repainted iron gate, Ravencourt Haven. Inside, the rooms were filled with books, cozy armchairs, and ever-burning hearths, transforming a place once haunted by secrets into a fortress of light and hope. Annabelle stood in the newly built Ravencourt Library, holding a hardcover book titled The Storm Taught Me to Breathe, embossed in deep blue. No author was listed, only the pseudonym The Survivor. But she knew it was Damien. His anonymous memoir, chronicling the days of betrayal, being hunted, and finding meaning in the dark, had become a quiet phenomenon, spreading across X and underground discussion forums. She turned to the first page where a handwritten note read, "To Annabelle, who taught me that peace is real." She smiled, set the book on the shelf, and stepped into the backyard where snow lightly blanketed the grass. A year ago, she never would have dared to imagine this day. After testifying to the FBI, confronting the ghosts of Victor Hargrove and the fire that consumed Ravencourt, she had left the city behind. With the help of a community fundraising initiative led by Lena Cruz and support from a whistleblower protection nonprofit, she had bought the estate, not for herself, but to turn it into a sanctuary for people like her and Damien, those threatened for speaking the truth. Now Ravencourt was home to journalists, former government employees, and survivors, each carrying their own story and scar. She paused beneath a pine tree, her breath misting in the crisp air. Her thick sweater and scarf warded off the cold, but Vermont's chill no longer scared her. It was home, the place where she had found herself again. Footsteps crunched in the snow behind her, and her heart lifted as Damien appeared, his black coat rippling in the breeze, his face no longer pale from fever or pain. He looked stronger, though the scars on his shoulder and leg still whispered of what they had endured. "You look like you belong here," he said, his voice low, a soft smile playing on his lips. She tilted her head, smiling back. "And you look like you stepped out of your own book." She nodded toward the library window. "I read it. You write better than I expected." He chuckled, a rare but warm sound. "I had good inspiration." He stepped closer and pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket. His eyes were steady, yet tender. "Annabelle, I'm not great with big speeches, but I know one thing. I want to be with you, not just in storms, but in every quiet moment after." She opened the box, heart fluttering. Inside was a simple silver ring, unflashy, yet beautiful like sunlight on fresh snow. "Damien," she whispered, her voice shaking. He took her hand, his warmth cutting through the cold. "We met in the middle of a storm," he said softly, as if the words were meant for her alone. "But I choose you, for every peace that comes next." She nodded, her vision blurring with tears, a radiant smile spreading across her face like melting snow. "I choose you too," she breathed. "No headlines, no grand wedding, just them, beneath the trees, exchanging quiet promises." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand trembling slightly, and then, as if the world held its breath, he kissed her, lightly, warmly, a kiss that tasted of snow and hope, as if every wound between them had just begun to heal. They stood together, wrapped in each other's arms beneath the pine boughs, sunlight filtering through the branches. Ravencourt stood silent, witness. Inside the library, a group of residents shared breakfast. Toast, eggs, hot coffee, prepared by a volunteer. Annabelle and Damien walked in hand, greeted by soft laughter and teasing about their glowing eyes. She looked around at the once frightened faces, now softened by smiles, and knew Ravencourt was no longer just a refuge. It was home, the home where the storm had ended. She squeezed Damien's hand, feeling the cool metal of the ring against her skin. "We did it," she whispered, emotion thick in her voice. He nodded, eyes never leaving hers. "And we'll keep going. Together." They sat at the long table sharing breakfast with those who once hid in the shadows. And in the light of Ravencourt, they were no longer just survivors. They were two souls who had found each other and found peace.